Psalm 139, verses 1 through 4 says this: O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. And then in Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 through 31. Are not two sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear. You are more valuable than many sparrows. And so the topic today is omniscience, the omniscience of God, God's comprehensive knowledge. That is the understanding that God knows everything, that this includes not only everything that ever has been, everything that is, and everything that will be, so past, present, and future, but also what would have been had the circumstances been otherwise, had He ordained otherwise. So God knows how the world would have changed, or things would have been affected if any little decision or any event had or had not happened or had not been decided. So God not only knows what is, but what would have been. So His knowledge is comprehensive. The scriptures are clear that this extends also to our thoughts, what we have in our hearts. God knows comprehensively. So God knows all things. If this is true, then how is this comforting? Well, in a couple of ways. Actually 4 ways. God knows your death. God knows your death. And if this is so, that He knows the time and the place and the way and the attendant circumstances, the people there, if this is so, then it cannot be changed and is in accordance with His perfect will. So your death, if God's knowledge is perfect, then your death cannot be changed, that it is set in His perfect will, and it is in accordance with His goodness and His perfection and His holiness. So your death is intimately known by God and indeed ordained by Him, which we will talk about when we get to His sovereignty or His divine will. The second thing is, God knows every tiny detail of your suffering. And if this is so, that He knows every tiny detail of your suffering, then that means that every one of those tiny details is in accordance with His perfect will as well, and His perfect goodness. So you can rest assured that every little pain, every little sorrow, fear, doubt, God is intimately acquainted with all of them. And far from being apathetic or far from being aloof or indifferent, God cares for the pains and the sorrows and the fears and the doubts of His people. And so if He knows every tiny detail and His knowledge is perfect, it cannot fail, then every tiny detail of your suffering is in accordance with His will, that He has ordained it. And number 3, tied to that, if He has ordained every tiny detail of your suffering, He has also ordained and knows every detail of the result, the effect, or the reason for your suffering. So God understands or sees intimately, fully your suffering in every tiny detail. And your suffering is in full view of God, every part of it. And knowing every intimate detail, He has aimed all those details, everything about your suffering, about your sorrow, about your trial. He has aimed every aspect of it at a good result or a good end. We will probably never see that in this life. We may see glimpses. We may be able to look back and say, God was good here, here, here. But we may not see it fully or clearly in this life. But we know because God has revealed Himself to be good and perfect and righteous and holy, that He has aimed it for that end. Plus He has promised us that all things work together for the good of those who love Him and called according to His purpose. Those are the ones that are His children, His covenant people. So every detail is aimed at a good result. So when you're in that suffering, you can think not just the overall God has an idea or God is aiming all of this toward a good end, but every little bitty thing, because he has an intimate knowledge of every little bit of your suffering. And then finally, God knows the very minute of your deliverance. If this is so, that God knows precisely when you will be delivered, and God's knowledge cannot fail because he's perfect, his knowledge is perfect, and it cannot fail, then your deliverance is sure. Whether that be in this life, or whether it be the final deliverance from all sin and sorrow and pain, when you see your Savior face to face, we can't know. But we know that God has a plan to deliver us. He's promised us. Ultimately, if not in this world, in the next. And so if God has the date of our deliverance in his knowledge, then that can't be altered because his knowledge is perfect. So we can take comfort, take hope that all of our suffering, the beginning, the middle, and the end, are all contained in God's perfect knowledge, that he is intimately acquainted with it. Not just has a vague idea of it, oh, this person's suffering, but every little bit of it he knows. And as we're going to talk about, as I said, when we talk about the divine will, every little bit of it he has ordained for his good purpose. So hopefully you take comfort in that. And we'll close with a prayer from the Valley of Vision. O Lord, I am a shell full of dust, but animated with an invisible, rational soul, and made anew by an unseen power of grace. Yet I am no rare object of valuable price, but one that has nothing and is nothing, although chosen of thee from eternity, given to Christ and born again. I am deeply convinced of the evil and misery of a sinful state, of the vanity of creatures, but also of the sufficiency of Christ. When thou wouldst guide me, I controlled myself. When thou wouldst be sovereign, I rule myself. When thou wouldst take care of me, I suffice myself. When I should depend on thy providings, I supply myself. When I should submit to thy providence, I follow my will. When I should study, love, honor, trust thee, I serve myself. I fault and correct thy laws to suit myself. Instead of thee, I look to a man's approbation, and am by nature an idolater. Lord, it is my chief design to bring my heart back to thee. Convince me that I cannot be my own God, or make myself happy, nor my own Christ to restore my joy, nor my own Spirit to teach, guide, rule me. Help me to see that grace does this by providential affliction. For when my credit is good, thou dost cast me lower. When riches are my idol, thou dost wing them away. When pleasure is all, thou dost turn it into bitterness. Take away my roving eye, curious ear, greedy appetite, lustful heart. Show me that none of these things can heal a wounded conscience, or support a tottering frame, or uphold a departing spirit. Then take me to the cross and leave me there. Amen.